All right, so we got trio, three guys with too much time on our hands, and we all realize that we are at the 50th anniversary of the release of the movie Jaws. And if anything would draw attention to a time to get down and chat about something, it is this movie, especially such a significant milestone. 50, 50, 50 years. I mean, is the math right on that? That is
June
crazy.
20th, 1975.
Wow. I mean, that is just crazy. But
Well, if
I
you take your age, subtract 50, and think about how old you were when you saw the movie, and yeah, I
Too
guess
young
it
to see an
works.
R-rated movie.
Yeah, well, it is. It is. I can remember when I first saw the movie. Did we went together, Mike? Didn't we go see the movie together? Were we in
Yeah.
Nebraska when we
It was
saw
at
it?
the Indian Hills Theater in Omaha, Nebraska, summer of 1975. Our aunt took you and I and Tom, our brother Tom, because we were
And
visiting. At that time, our one of our sets of grandparents lived in Nebraska, and we were there in the summer. And can you please take us to see the movie? And she did.
and what kind of pressure did we apply? We asked her, and she said yes. And I do recall that as the first thing that we did when we got back was we went swimming. Was
In a
what we did.
pool?
Yes, it was in a pool.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I didn't. And you hear that about people were scared to go into the water or whatever. I thought that this was a very scary movie. I thought it was a well done movie, but I never had any fear of going into the
I
water where I was thinking Jaws and sharks and that type of thing that would keep
I
me from swimming.
I don't know if we. I mean, after that summer, I don't know when we would have had an opportunity to actually swim in the ocean. And one thing I think that's pretty clear is sharks are not freshwater creatures.
Nor do they swim in swimming pools
Yeah. So
at all. So
Regularly.
well, I just
so
but in any case, that was like the first time. That's where we saw it, was that summer. And just before just talking about seeing the movie, I think one thing that's kind of a part of the whole situation is there was a build up before the movie came out. I can remember back in the old days when on Saturdays, you'd watch ABC Wide World of
Oh,
Sports
yes.
with Howard Cosell,
Well,
Jim McKay, and etc. And they were covering, and this was probably like a year before, like the summer before. I don't know exactly when, but I remember seeing on Wide World of Sports, it was some big game fishing, or maybe they were, excuse me, maybe they were like in Australia. I don't remember the details, but it was they were out on a boat doing some kind of fishing, and sharks were around. But in any case, they talked about, okay, now we're in Australia or wherever, and there's great white sharks in the waters here, and we have with us Peter Benchley, author of the new novel Jaws, and I don't remember all the details other than that it was a big game fishing type setting, and they were talking about sharks, and they had Peter Benchley was along, and the reason he was significant because he just wrote this book and blah blah blah. So it was something that it was out there, and I can remember at the Piggly Wiggly grocery store in Appleton, Wisconsin, which was nearby where Mark and I lived, going through the checkout and seeing the old Bantam books, kind of pocket book type paperback with that, the water and the shark coming up and the naked lady swimming, Jaws. And so I mean, as a kid, I saved up the $1.95 or whatever it was, bought it and read it. So I'd read the book at 12 before I'd
mhm.
seen the movie.
I never could rent
So it
books in
was
the library.
it was something that was, they either intentionally or not, they found a way to kind of get it out there so that by the time the movie came out, people were anticipating the movie.
Wasn't there a hand job given in the book? Wasn't that with Hooper and Brody's wife?
Yeah, they have an affair.
Wasn't there something
There,
a little above our pay grade at that
there,
time going on?
there was an affair between Matt Hooper and Ellen Brody, Chief Brody's wife, in the book. And while I didn't particularly understand all of the stuff that was going on there, it doesn't change the fact that when I saw the naked lady swimming on the cover of the book, I mean, I that made me more interested.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in that purgatory between liking to see naked women and understanding all the shit that was going on between Hooper and Mrs. Brody.
Yeah, they obviously skipped that in the in the movie. But how about you, Andrew? When did you see it?
Well, my mother was a librarian at the Park Public Library. It was her chosen profession. She brought the book home, hardcover, and she read it and gave it to me, and I read it. So as soon as it came out, I wanted to go see it. And my mother, father, I'm not sure if my sister came along. We went to the Golf Mill Theater. And then I loved it so much that I went a couple of times after that. I rode my bicycle up to the Golf Mill Theater, which I assure you I did not know how far that was until I did it the first time. A lot farther than when my father was driving us in his car.
Yeah.
But I probably seriously saw it 3 more times that summer.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Checked it out. It was it certainly caught you. It was a good movie. I mean, at watching it at 12 years old, not a big critic of all the little intricacies of filmmaking. It was just an entertaining movie to watch. Watched it a lot in the last 50 years. I mean, I've seen this movie a number of times. Either it's on TV or you sit down and actually take the time to watch it. I mean, I've probably seen the movie in 15 times since then, maybe 20. So it's gotten a lot of play, and I certainly have actually, I would say, grown to appreciate it more as a movie since I first saw it. Although there's certain aspects of the movie that maybe stick out as a little, I don't know, a little sillier, that type of thing than it did when I first saw it. But obviously a great movie. A movie that still gets attention. Mike, you brought up the book, and as well as you Andrew, your introduction to it. It is interesting that they acquired the movie and actually started work, not acting, but like the production work of getting things together before the book was finished. They had they had awarded the contract for the book publishing, and it immediately got picked up by a studio. And I know I think, Mike, we had some book about the making of Jaws, or maybe it was like a special edition magazine or something.
I think I still have that.
I about some of the issues and difficulties that they had in getting it made. But one of the things that we talked about was that book or that magazine talked about was, Peter Benchley was starting to run into some financial troubles because he wasn't going to get his big check until the book was actually finished and turned into, to whoever published it, Random House or whoever. I don't know who published it, but he was still working on the book. And they were actually out there trying to figure out if they were going to be able to train a shark and trying to get cast actors and that type of thing, because they knew they had something hot, right, on their hands.
I think the book was actually published before it got like to that stage of the production. But I mean, you are right. Yeah, the name of the producers of the movie was Richard Zanuck and David Brown, and they may have been involved with the movie The Sting, which was very successful. Came out in like 1973, and they they were made aware of the manuscript for the book before the book was actually published.
Yeah.
And so that sort of thing, I mean, they before the book actually came out, they did, yeah, this has got some potential here, and we're gonna take this and see where it goes. That had definitely started before the book came out. I don't know if it was quite
I might be ahead of myself there.
but the bottom line is that the movie started, the initial beginnings of the movie started to occur before the book was published. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pre-production in a movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they don't just say, roll film 2 days after they say, let's make a movie. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I can see where they're saying, okay, the book's almost done. Let's get the ball rolling.
And it's kind of, this movie was a special challenge as well. There was a lot of, I mean, this was not just a simple period piece or whatever. There was a lot of effects, and filming underwater and this kind of stuff is always tough. So it was an accomplishment just getting it done, and kind of interesting how some of the stuff came in. I guess what do people think? What are some of the what pops to mind immediately as some of the real memorable, or maybe let's say most memorable scene from the movie, looking back now after 50 years?
Well, it's hard not to start off with when Chief Brody is putting chum in the water, the blood and the fish guts and stuff into the water, and then you see that first time that you really see the shark out of, who's with its head out of the water, and then we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard not to start off with that one.
Yeah,
I mean,
great scene, and again, well set up, well directed. The positioning of the camera and the look, he was kind of giving the other guys on the boat a hard time because he was sick of having to be always the one laying out the chum. He's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, I think, and this movie is a great example of how we should bring smoking back to hospitals again, because there was a lot of smoking in this movie, including inside the hospital before this thing went. But I digress here. But I think he had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and he's kind of complaining about having to always do the chum, and then you really weren't expecting. They kind of drew your attention to this banter and his frustration, and suddenly it came out. Great scene.
I can go slow ahead. Come down here and show some of this shit.
Yeah.
Roy Scheider's reaction. The reaction shot that they cut to of him sitting just absolutely perfectly straight with his cigarette still hanging out of his mouth. Can we swear on this show?
And
it's a total oh fuck.
Oh yeah.
Without saying it, he's just like, whoa.
And then he kind of walks.
Outside of my experience,
he kind of walks backwards into the cabin, and that's when he's like, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." Just a great scene.
From that shot of the chum hitting the shark in the nose to Quint putting the first harpoon into it, fabulous scene.
Oh yeah,
that whole sequence is just great. You get the conflict between Hooper and Quint, and
he's kind of complaining about pulling the boat around, and I also thought the kind of music, there's that kind of orchestra, almost band music that's as they're going along, and there's kind of an excitement that the boat seems to be speeding up, and you really don't understand what those barrels are yet, and it just it begins a sequence that becomes a fantastic scene, and really goes. So I'd agree, Mike. That's a biggie. I really start right at the very beginning, at the first shark attack. The look on that woman's face as she gets tugged underwater, and she pops back up again, and the terror and realization that this isn't just something like, oh my, I mean, I think that was incredibly well done. And the scenes later on with the kids that get killed and in the sailboat and stuff, that's what made people keep their kids out of the water. But what made people say, I'm not going in the water, was that first scene, right? The I think that was just so well done, and she finally she grabs a hold of that little buoy thing, like, and she's breathing and just gasping for air. I thought that was just incredibly well done, and put people more in the shoes of not, oh, what would happen if my kid got eaten by a shark. It was like, what would happen if I was eaten by a shark. And I just thought that was a fantastic, great way to start the movie.
Although it was better in the book.
But lot of things better in the book. The hand job was better in the book, right?
I didn't even show it in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
You've read the book, right? Have you read the book?
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I know about the hand job.
She's Chrissy Watkins is swimming and she feels something. She feels like a punch in her leg. And if you recall from the book, she reaches down to how you, like, if you feel something hit your leg, and she realizes her leg's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that in the book, I mean, Benchley just nailed that. Just the horror that washed over her. That why is my leg missing?
Mm-hmm.
And how bad is this going to get?
She's reaching around with her hand where her foot is supposed to be, and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And she kind of gets up, and then she feels like a knobby bone and something warm that's sort of flowing, which is it's her bone and the blood coming out of her blood vessels in her leg. And
and between the shock and the cold temperatures of the water at the time, they didn't really address that a whole lot in the movie either. But the water temperatures were pretty cold, and it's like, just the whole pain and the type of thing that you'd expect just hadn't caught up yet with what was going on.
Well, and they, for purposes of figuring out how they were going to do this, part of the whole thing was that they didn't really know, even at the time that the actual shooting started, what exactly they had in terms of the mechanical shark.
Yeah.
They didn't necessarily know what their options were. And, there's a number of different things you can find on YouTube, or we have a DVD of the movie here at the house, and there's an extra feature, the making of Jaws and stuff, and so there's a lot of information out there for people who are curious about what went on in terms of the actual making of the film. But part of the thought process was, well, because I mean, in the book, it describes the shark kind of coming out of the water and kind of taking the woman's body into its mouth, and it kind of comes out and then splashes back into the water, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And they just thought, no, at this stage of the game, we don't want to show those cards at this point. And the music, when there's the shot from below where she's at one point she's doing the backstroke, and then they show her just treading water, and then the camera's rising closer to her. I mean, it's from the shark's point of view, and the music.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, that was just, for purposes of the film, a much more effective way of building tension, suspense, and ultimately fear. Kind of the terror of the scene and of the whole idea of this man-eating shark that's decided to start chowing down in that area. And a little fact about, we mentioned the music just now. In the scene we were talking about previously, where the shark shows itself to Brody when he's chumming, no music.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, the shark's involvement is always presaged by that music.
Yeah.
But not in that scene, and that's why it was a surprise.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
You didn't know it was coming, but the opening scene was well done. It was well done by the filmmakers.
And really set the stage, like you say. Then you knew after that music, and I have to say, I mean, you can talk about all movies. I mean, in movie history, there are really only a handful of things that stick with culture as well as that movie is connected to shark attacks, right? To Jaws and the shark attacks. That dun 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 dun. I mean, anybody and not a whole lot of people that didn't see the movie or haven't seen the movie since, that does not directly make that connection. You've obviously got, sayings and that type of thing that people will talk about a lot, but that is up there as far as things that have stuck with the collective culture since the movie was seen.
The Andrew, what do you think? What's a scene? What's a scene that you can identify as one of your favorites?
Well, I mean, again, from Brody chumming through the first part in the shark, I love that whole sequence. Um, oh, okay, the USS Indianapolis scene.
Oh, oh
That one's
yes.
pretty memorable.
Yeah, that whole
The
thing kind of sets up well where I can top your scar, I can top your scar, and a little bit of drinking going on. There's still kind of a way, and then it's interesting the way the tale of the Indianapolis kind of turns the mood,
Oh yeah.
which is obviously a prelude to the visitor they were going to have very very shortly.
Well, that explains why Quint does what he does for a living. But Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper,
Mhm.
drunken, obviously, drank more than he usually drinks, drunk, having a good time. You were on the USS Indianapolis. I mean, it just sobers him up.
the
Yep.
And Brody's
the
like, got no idea what they're talking about, and he's still kind of chuckling. What happened?
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point about the way that Richard Dreyfuss handles the acting, because they're just joking around, showing each other their scars and blah blah blah, and then he said, "Well, what's that? What's that there? I had a tattoo removed," and Hooper goes, "No, don't tell me, mother."
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he says, "No, that's the USS Indianapolis." And once Quint says Indianapolis, just the change that comes over Hooper, he's sort of like it's almost like he sobers up. He just this slow change of realizations. You were on the Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It really is. That's a well done performance by Dreyfuss, responding to that. And well, and that kind of sets up the sort of like why he does that, sort of the Quint as Captain Ahab uh,
Yes.
aspect of the story.
Well, and I mean, obviously Peter Benchley wasn't on the Indianapolis. The way that was written, and the way that Quint explains what was happening, and then after the plane came and found them, and then another plane came and signaled, and they were going to start to rescue people, and he talks about, yeah, that's the only time I was really scared. I didn't want to get taken by the sharks. I mean, they had to talk to somebody who was there. I mean, to get that to come up with that type of insight, really well done. The way the whole story was explained and everything. Great. That's a great scene.
Okay,
I'm
prior
not
to
sure whether
Jaws, most
is
people
that
had not heard of the USS Indianapolis.
Yeah.
After Jaws, everyone had.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, all of a sudden, it
the
became the mission of the shark.
Yep.
And prior to that, people were just like, "What did the Indianapolis do?"
Exactly. I'd
at this
agree.
point at this point I don't recall whether that was in the book at all. Because in the book, I think they went out on separate days. They didn't stay out on the water overnight, if I recall correctly. And so I don't know if the the monologue about the Indianapolis was even in the book, because it went through. There were a couple of screenwriters along with Peter Benchley that
Mm-hmm.
that did the screenplay for the movie, and there was a screenwriter whose name was Sackler. I mean, and the reason I remember that is because it's the same one as the Purdue Pharma family,
Yeah.
Sackler, and who didn't really want credit, who just did some writing. And then there was another relatively well-known screenwriter named John Milius, who's been involved in writing a number of different relatively well-known movies. He was involved in Apocalypse Now to some extent and whatnot. But then he took a crack at it, and then also Robert Shaw, because there's some, sort of like urban legend that Robert Shaw improvised that scene. And while I don't think that that's true, he did contribute. I mean, he
Hmm.
took like the last version that John Milius did, and he sort of tweaked it to make it his own. Is I think how that came about, but very. So I don't know. I don't even know if it was in the book or not,
Okay,
but it
we all
was.
agree that everything on the internet is true.
Yes, yes.
Well, why
If
not?
it's on the internet, let's it's at least a starting point.
Okay, yes, the sinking of the USS Indianapolis is mentioned in the novel Jaws.
All right. Well, but
Yeah, but I mean
be all that as
they
it
could
may,
have just been giving some background about Quint. I mean, if that conversation, because I'll be honest, I don't recall either, Mike. Again, I sometimes struggle to get the details, especially when you've read a book and you've seen a movie, and they both happened 20 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. Sometimes it's hard to remember exactly which pieces were in which things, but
and it doesn't necessarily matter because it was. I think we all appear to agree it was very well handled in the movie,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
and it's one of the more memorable. I mean, that you ask 10 people what's your favorite scene in Jaws, and you're going to get more than one that's going to point that out, no question.
So, what are some things? Now we've talked a lot about some of the positive things in the movie. I mean, first of all, I think one of the things that makes it a truly scary movie, I consider it more of an action a movie than like a horror film or whatever. But it scares a lot of people. And one of the reasons that it scares a lot of people is it's something that could happen. There absolutely could be a huge, killer great white that starts feeding along some tourist town, and some people have got to go and deal with it on a, on all this this whole situation is feasible, right? This is not, and one of the horror movies of the 70s that followed after Jaws, when people realized there was a lot of money in scaring people at the theaters. It wasn't Poltergeist or whatever, where there's something magical or fictional that happened. This was a realistic scenario of what could happen. But there maybe were some not so realistic things that happened
I'll
in the movie.
I'll take a crack at that. Uh, I think that the best contestant for that category is the scene where the two yokels, one of them grabs his wife's roast,
Oh
and they
yes.
go out on the dock
Mm-hmm.
and throw it in the water with a chain attached.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got an inner tube, and then they put the chain onto the end of the dock
Yeah.
and everything. Uh, for a couple of reasons. I think the main reason is that there's a certain amount uh, of emphasis that's put in the certainly in the book and in the movie about how it's disruption in the water and things that create vibrations like a wounded fish or
Yeah.
something, whatever it might
Why-
be. um uh and that's what attracts the shark.
Yeah.
Now, you just throw a hunk of meat, and and there's an inner tube on the surface of the water, and the chain goes down. There's just a thing of meat hanging there. Um, unless the shark just coincidentally happened to be right
Like bumps
there.
into it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there was nothing to attract
Yeah.
the shark,
That whole scene was
and
just comic relief.
Yeah.
and
Seriously, that's all it was.
so I just and it wasn't. I mean, it fits into the whole. You never see the shark, and it's
Yeah.
obviously something that's a lot more substantial than a lot of people really assume.
Mm-hmm.
And so the incident depicted in that scene, kind of fits in with the overall narrative of the film. But I thought that was it was a little unrealistic, and it just happened. It didn't fit in with how the shark was supposed to behave, unless like they just happened to drop it right into the shark's mouth, you know.
You could literally cut that scene and it would not affect the movie.
Oh yeah, I'd agree with you, Andrew. And a little comic relief, tossed in there, and then the I think shedding light on the fact that the locals and the local population didn't necessarily know how to deal with this, or the ways that they were going to use to deal with this weren't going to be effective. Now, there was a couple things with Quint that I thought wouldn't be the way that someone like that responded. I'll get to those in a second. The first thing is, when Hooper goes down in that cage,
Oh yeah.
this is a person who understands the speed and the quickness of sharks. The fact that he would have no concept that the shark might be coming up from behind him, I find to be unrealistic. The way he was just kind of sitting there, he wasn't even. I mean, I could picture being down in that thing, and I would have been like, "Where the fuck is this guy?" I mean, he sets the harpoon, the poison gun against the side. Like, okay, I got a little bit of. I mean, I think that was a little convenient to have the demise of that cage. That might just be me, and maybe they were just trying to speed things along. But I think more. I've always, I looked at the way that Quint acted towards his demise, and first of all, the guy was certainly a competent fisherman and a competent sailor, right? He knew within his bones about his boat, about everything. He was clearly a World War I general in this movie. He did not understand what he was up against. The World War I generals kept sending their troops across no man's land, not understanding that they were all going to be killed by this new thing called the machine gun, right? And here, Quint was using what was clearly a high level of competence, but he was up against an enemy that he did not understand how to deal with. But he understood his boat. He understood the notion of him driving the boat motor into the ground. I find to be unrealistic.
Yes.
I don't think that he would have done that. He would have sensed that he's giving the thing too much, too much gas. Hooper certainly understood that was happening, and that act was finally the point where he finally looked at Hooper and said, "Look, what can this stuff of yours do?" He clearly was at the end of his rope when that happened, when he realized he'd lost the operation of his boat. I don't think that he would have. I don't think he would have done that. And one last thing, sorry, and I was always confused about his just resistance and refusal to ask for help. There was a point where they realized they were up against something, just much bigger than what they were expecting, and to bring in some Coast Guard, or at least to let somebody know where you're at, or whatever, and his refusal to do that. I know he was a little obsessed with the sharks and that type of thing, but I found that to be a little unrealistic as well.
Okay, that one I'm going to say was money. I mean, one, it's his personal hatred of sharks because of Indianapolis, and two, if he kills the shark, he gets 10 grand. If they radio to shore and say, "You want to send a couple of boats out here with some armed men on them?" He might be thinking, "Are they going to get a piece of my money? Because that dead shark is my money."
I think he could have. I think he could have. If Brody's like, "I want to call for help," and he says, "I get the money," right? I think they were trying to portray something a little more driven in Quint's personality.
Yeah.
And the money, he clearly was doing it for the money, because he had a much higher demand than what they
Anything
were.
worth doing is worth doing for money.
Yeah, exactly. I think some negotiation might have been in order before he took the frickin' mallet to the radio set.
No one would ever do that.
Yeah,
you do that. Yeah, you don't destroy your communications.
I agree with both those aspects of Quint, particularly the the burning out his engine.
Yeah.
Because I'd thought the same thing. But and I think the only real explanation for that is his obsession, the Captain Ahab aspect of Quint. And the why doesn't he want anybody else coming? Maybe a little bit of the obsession, and the money makes sense because the scene with the select men, where he scrapes his fingernails on the chalkboard. They're offering 3,000, and he's like, I want 10.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so money.
I'll find him for 3.
The money aspect was legitimate, and that could have been handled. It's like, we ain't gonna have anybody coming out here and taking any chunk of my 10 grand.
Yeah.
I mean, it could just a brief line along those lines could have kind of explained that, but and partly the obsession, and also, I mean, it works better for the movie, for the story, and the because really, when you get down to it, one of the themes, and not to shift gears here, but just one of the themes of the movie is that ultimately it comes down to one man, Chief Brody, the guy who's afraid of the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that has to accomplish the goal of getting rid of this shark that's terrorizing Amity Island. And part of the narrative, which is the same with the book, the Brodies had lived in New York City and then come out to Amity. And the scene where Hooper and Brody go out on the boat in the evening after they've cut open the tiger shark and determined that there's no human remains in its digestive tract, so it couldn't have been the one that caused the deaths in Amity. And they go out on the boat at night, where they run into Ben Gardner's boat.
Old Ben Gardner's boat. Yeah.
Ben Gardner's boat. But before Hooper goes in, before Hooper gets in the water, no, there's one. Why the fuck are you getting in the water?
Yeah.
It looks like a shark just attacked this boat. You're in an area where the shark is going to be. Why are you getting in the water?
Yeah.
But before you get to that,
they needed a thing where Ben Gardner's head could, where Ben could pop in and say hello.
Before that, but they're already out on the boat. They've got like a bottle of wine because Hooper showed up at the Brodies with 2 bottles of wine, and so they're drinking. And there's a brief part where Brody is talking about when he was a cop in New York, saying, "Yeah, in New York, there's so many problems. You can't, you feel like you can't make a difference, and you're just trying to, keep your finger in the dike or whatever. You're just trying to keep things from going into complete chaos." And then he says, "In Amity, one man can make a difference."
Yeah, he does.
One man can make a difference, and Brody's kind of always the guy wanting to do the right thing throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
He's the one he's not in it for the money. He's not in it for the glory. He just wants to protect the community and do the right thing, and getting rid of this shark is part of that. And so sort of like, the one just man prevailed.
Yeah, I kind of was thinking about that, though, and thinking about the movie. It's like, who should really get the credit for the killing of the shark? Now, Quint's already dead at that point, but when you take a look at the work that was done to actually find and get, the shark, I mean, Brody basically accidentally fell his way into killing the shark.
Yeah.
He's sitting there, the boat's sinking, he's in the cabinet, the shark is sticking his fucking head in the thing, and it just so happens that floating in the water in between Brody and the shark is this tank that we know, based on earlier in the movie, is highly explosive, right? So he shoves that in the shark's mouth, and then he obviously from that point thinks, if I can shoot that thing, I can kill this shark. But I mean, there was a lot of work between Quint and then the expertise of Hooper that had gotten him to that, to that point. He wasn't an overly skilled chum thrower. That's for sure. He certainly didn't find it to be his passion.
Well, and Quint did all the heavy lifting. He put all the barrels into them.
Yeah,
I mean, the shark was there because of Quint's actions.
yeah,
And
yeah,
of course, if
The
Hooper doesn't bring his dive gear, then Brody can't even kill the shark.
yeah, yeah. Yes,
I think that the team, the team of Brody, Quint, and Hooper, I mean, I think they all share credit for having done it. I mean, and the end result couldn't have been achieved without all three of them.
yeah, yeah,
And I don't know if and that's not to say that Brody deserves the most credit because he's the one that pulled the trigger at the very end. And well, in the book, the shark just basically died of its injuries
Yes.
that it received from
Yeah.
getting harpooned and
yeah,
stabbed, and there was no and so they were, for the movie, they specifically wanted a clear cut good triumphs over evil,
oh yeah,
and that's how they came up with that. Not the apparently there were a conversation between Steven Spielberg and Peter Benchley, and Spielberg said to Peter Benchley, look, the end in the book, the end is a downer.
yeah.
And so I think for the movie they
Doesn't
they
Hooper
wanted
die in the book?
Yes, he does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, he does.
And
Yeah,
that
it's almost they're almost laughing and joking as they're paddling back in with this. Well, I mean, there's elements that you have to have in a movie, and if you want to know why the radio got smashed, it's because you have to have there's no turning back now point in a movie. I mean, in an action type
Oh yeah, and there was
suspense.
no turning back after that.
Exactly.
Quint's
So
not
I
taking
mean,
the boat in.
that's certainly why it was done. We're in this now, and if we don't find some way to survive, we're going to lose big time. And so I mean that's why it was there. But just interesting elements of this. And then I agree with you. I can that conversation. It's like now we can't have a movie end like this, right? A book can end like that. A movie has to have this is it. This is the clear definition of who's won and who's lost.
Okay, so how does
well-
it change the movie if Hooper dies the same way he died in the book?
Not as
Uh,
not as nice of a wrap up at the end. That when they're kind of like they're kind of paddling their way back on that makeshift raft that they put together, and they're kind of bantering a little bit. I mean that was almost a smile on your face kind of
Oh yeah,
kind of
very-
Well,
ending.
I think in part of that, the scene where after Brody has shot the tank, killed the shark with the explosion, and so okay, good has triumphed over evil. Brody killed the shark. It's good. Well, what happens before Hooper just sort of bubbles up out of the water?
Yeah,
And then, Brody sees him, he comes over. So it's like, all right. So, and Brody knows that Quint, is dead. And so it is sort of it increases that sort of levity, or not levity isn't the right word, but just the triumph of the two of them kicking together with the barrels back towards the shore. That moment when Hooper comes up, it's like, okay, this is over. The nightmare is over, and we
Yeah.
can all kind of go back to our. So I think that scene, along with the the paddling their way back to shore, I think really kind of makes it more of a feel good ending.
Yes.
And and the one the in the book the characters didn't like each other.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Quint didn't like really either of Brody or Hooper,
But
and
he was willing to tolerate Brody because Brody could shoot.
yeah,
No, seriously, they
but,
did the shooting competition
and-
with the can launcher,
Yeah,
and Brody was good, so Quint was like, "Okay, I'll put it
Yeah.
on you."
and Brody and Hooper were on the outs
Yep.
because Hooper
The whole
was
doing his
rolling
wife
around with
thing.
his wife. I mean,
the hand job again. Back to the hand job.
it well, and I mean, there's a scene where on the boat, Brody ends up almost choking out Hooper.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so because when they're down, like around the time of the Indianapolis monologue, and they're singing, "Show Me the Way to Go Home," and comparing their scars and all that stuff, that sort of buddy movie type atmosphere that was created, that never would have, that couldn't have happened in the book.
Nope.
Yeah.
It couldn't have. It would have been so inconsistent, and it's the whole idea of the Brody's marriage being kind of on the rocks, and if you get on the internet and you start looking around it, the book is described as sort of displaying this post Watergate social malaise. I saw written somewhere about the book, and the mayor, the Mayor Vaughn,
Yeah.
the one who's smoking in the hospital.
Yes. Bring it back. Bring it back.
And apparently he owed money to the mob.
Yeah.
I mean, and I didn't even remember this from the book because I was, when I was young when I read it, but just things were just a lot more sordid and just unlikable in the book. It was just kind of a more cynical depiction of the people. And while Vaughn is kind of the mayor is the bad guy kind of in the movie, but he's not that bad.
No.
The concern appears to be for the economic welfare of the community as a whole, even though he's kind of disregarding, a public safety issue. It's his motivation isn't so much greed for himself or not wanting to get whacked because he can't pay back his creditors. It's depicted so differently.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. In the movie, he was acting like you'd expect a small town mayor that is heavily dependent on the summer tourist season to act. I mean, it's kind of like, hey man, you can say barracuda and people will snicker, but you say shark, and we're going to have all kinds of problems here, and really just like, hey man, let's and then the tension in the town meeting when people are asking whether the beach is closed, and yes, we're closing, and the mayor has to step in, no, only for 24 hours because he can see that the people are gonna rebel. Yeah, I would agree that he's not necessarily portrayed as, maybe not looking at the whole big picture, but yeah, not a bad guy. You can see a lot of people in his position making those same decisions, and he certainly felt bad about it as he was puffing away on that Marlboro in the hospital.
His kids were on that beach too.
That's right.
No, there is genuine regret.
Yeah.
He you can tell that he sincerely realizes the implications of the decisions that were made up to that point, and that's why it wasn't bullshit. Or at least it didn't seem that way at that point. And so and I guess another aspect of that is that you had people at each other in the book, and there's a lot of division socially and politically in the United States right now, and you got factions of people that are mistrustful of the others, and this in the movie Jaws, it's everybody against the shark.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, it's just, look, the only real bad destructive force here that we need to deal with is this fucking shark.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how are we going to do it? And I think the movie kind of accomplishes that well. I mean, it showed there's normal disagreement, and people have different priorities, and people are willing to look the other way, depending on how it might affect their financial well-being. This and that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was like, look, there is this problem. The city's going to pay, and let's hope they get rid of this problem
Yeah.
and then we can all go back to our normal lives. And that's something that was, I think, part of how effective the movie was, is it sort of accomplished that over the first half of the movie, or however long it is, the first
Yeah.
portion of the movie before Brody and Quint and Hooper go out on the Orca, the boat. It's at that point there was nobody that was really taking the other side,
Yeah.
or in disagreement about, whatever, by whatever means, we need to get rid of this problem.
Yeah. Well, and that's
Uh,
Right,
that.
but yeah, you just
It,
disagree on the means.
yeah, but I mean that kind of wraps, although they're not the same length of time or whatever, but I mean the first act of the movie really ends when this decision is made. No, we're going to give this guy whatever his money, and because we've all agreed we've got a problem and he's going to solve it. I mean, I think in that hospital room when
We have a pebble in our shoe.
yeah, yes, I've got a pebble in my shoe. But he's like, hey, you're going to do what you do best. You're going to sign this
Voucher.
work order, so we're going to pay Quint what he wants. That kind of okay. Now we know what's going to happen here, and kind of the second act really starts with the boat going out, right? And it's the destruction of the radio. And no, there's no going back. We are in this. It's, a lot has happened, and we're really getting towards the end of the movie, but that's kind of where we move into the final stage, where it is us as three humans against this shark, and let's who knows how it's going to turn out, right? Just all the elements of just of an action, suspense type story are there, and just done really well. I mean, had a fairly good director for the movie. So
For a 26-year-old.
yes.
Okay, so Mike brought up the point that Brody is basically a good guy. He's trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
And if you think to the first discussion between the mayor and Chief Brody when they're on the ferry going to talk to the Cub Scouts doing this swim for their merit badge, and the mayor's just like, you're going to close the beaches on your own authority? He's like, what other authority do I need? And they start saying, well, you got to do this, that, and the other thing. And he's just like, hey, I'm just acting based on the information I was given. And that's when the doctor's just like, well, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, maybe it was a boat. Yeah.
Let's rethink this. But I mean, right there, Brody is just like, I'm not the bad guy here.
Yeah.
My reactions are based on what I was told.
Yeah.
And he's a team player.
Yeah.
He's trying to work with the mayor. It's not until more people start to die that he's just like, Larry,
Yeah.
your course of action is not going to solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, Larry is just like, there's money involved.
Yeah.
Chief.
Yeah.
Nobody pays us to close our beaches. They
And-
pay us to swim on our beaches.
Also, which just kind of brings to mind, also a very well done scene. Again, very early on when Brody's just typing out the report,
Yes.
and he's on the phone with
Yes.
the medical examiner, and it's like, oh, cause of death, okay, and nothing is said, but you see him type shark attack right
Yes.
in the thing there. Again, just another example. Pretty well done.
Another memorable scene, the Chrissy Watkins autopsy with Hooper.
Oh yes. He's talking very scientifically and whatever
trying not to
what's
throw
going
up.
on. I actually
and
go on, Mike.
one very small aspect, but I think very interesting aspect of that, is when the medical examiner brings the remains out, and it's like a bus tray.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's not a lot left.
Yeah, and
and
Hooper reacts to that.
Not a lot left, and the only thing they ever show of the remains is the hand.
Yeah.
The hand is there on the beach
Yeah.
when it's found with the crabs and whatnot, and then Hooper kind of picks up the hand, and you can see part of the forearm, and it's been chewed up, and
Yeah.
and Hooper, after he kind of looks at it, he's like, "This was no boating accident. Have you called
Yeah.
the Coast Guard? Are you kidding?"
Yeah. Also pretty another autopsy scene when they cut open the shark.
Yes.
And actually it seems like physically Hooper was more grossed out, by the smell of that than he was in the in the coroner's office. But interesting scene, especially when I knew it. He came up from the south, from warmer waters, and he tosses that Louisiana license plate at Brody. Pretty interesting scene as well.
Well, I think in the book it goes into more detail about these animals as eating machines. That they just they'll it gets in their mouth, it'll go down the gullet.
Mm-hmm. Now, great cast of actors in the movie, obviously. And I always, when I see people like this, I like to think of Movie Fest. Which of these actors would create the best movie fest based on the actors, on the roles that they have played? So we'll set Jaws aside for just a second. We'll come back, but as we look at the actors, which ones would have your best movie fest in here? Now, whenever I play this game, I always look to the character actors. So I'm going to look at the mayor. I'm going to look at Murray Hamilton and say that guy was actually in quite a few movies to check out. He was going back to The Graduate. He was in The Graduate. He was in Brubaker.
He was Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, yes.
He was Mr. Robinson.
And other the Hustler, the Boston Strangler, Amityville Horror, The Way We Were. This guy's in a lot of movies. I do think though I still would.
Darby's Rangers.
What's that?
He was in
Darby's Rangers.
Yes.
World War II movie with James Garner.
Yes. Also, Laura Dern was also in the movie as in a small role. Might have been an extra or something like that, but does count. But I will get. Robert Shaw would actually be who I would look at, even understanding all the very good movies that Murray Hamilton was in.
Murray Hamilton was also in Anatomy of a Murder.
Yes.
Which is one of the better one of the better courtroom dramas out there, just in my humble opinion. But, we'll rattle off the Robert Shaw movies. I mean, The Sting. From Russia with Love.
Force 10 from Navarone, The Deep from Russia with Love, Battle of the Bulge, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, Man for All Seasons, The Battle of Britain, Black Sunday, Robin and Mary and the Grapes of Wrath. The guy's been in a lot of great movies.
That's a good resume.
And that's just kind of, again, you can kind of go if you look at the IMDb pages or whatever. He was in a lot of other movies that would also kind of spring to mind. But some pretty good movies. Let's face it, Richard Dreyfuss was in a lot of good movies as well. I just when you look at like great movies like The Sting, that's really up there in the prestigious thing. And again, some of the other movies. Now, Roy Scheider also had some the French Connection, all that jazz, Blue Thunder, Sorcerer, great movie, worthy of an episode of conversation in itself. Yeah. Marathon Man 2010, some awfully good.
The Seven Ups.
7 Ups, yes, exactly.
I think that I would have a hard time arguing against Robert Shaw, but some of the other movies that Roy Scheider has been in, even though they aren't necessarily as sort of big name or marquee titles, like he was in The French Connection, and the character he played in Marathon Man was one of the more interesting characters in the movie.
Dustin Hoffman's brother.
Mm-hmm. And Sorcerer, it's just is a uniquely interesting movie, in my opinion. So he's not one to be he's not one to be given short shrift. And 2010 you mentioned stuff like that. But I
really enjoy that movie.
But I think that just on paper, you're going to have a hard time. I'm going to have a hard time arguing that would transcend Robert Shaw. But now Richard Dreyfuss, he'd been in American Graffiti.
Yeah.
He won Best Actor Oscar for The Goodbye Girl, which was from it was a Neil Simon. It was
Yeah.
kind of a light comedy. I mean, it wasn't. It was well,
Yeah.
it was a good job. He
Was
was an
that before
interesting
Jaws?
character. That was after Jaws.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so. Okay.
The
No,
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now, American Graffiti was before Jaws, though,
Oh yeah.
right?
Sorry,
Amer-
72 or
American Graffiti was before, and Richard Dreyfuss might have had some like bit parts in movies earlier than that. But in
Yeah.
between American Graffiti and Jaws, he was in a movie called The Apprenticeship of Duddy
Oh yeah, sure,
Kravitz.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was first approached about Jaws, he said no, because he thought this sounds like it's going to be a bitch to shoot. And so he said no. But then he saw like the opening he saw the finished film of Duddy Kravitz, and he was so disappointed in his performance. And I've never seen that film, so I don't
Yeah.
know whether that reaction was justified or not. But he was so disappointed and just sort of displeased with how he thought, I better take this movie or I may never get another job again.
Yeah.
And so he called back, whether it was Spielberg or whoever it was, and says that part's still open in this Jaws. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
uh,
it served him well. I mean, because Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Uh, uh, what about Bob? Mr. Holland's Opus. Poseidon, Tin Men. Down and Out in Beverly Hills. The American President. A lot of some leading man, some supporting actor roles, but I mean, and a much longer list than just those. Again, you've got some Oscar material, you've got some Best Movie material and stuff that is in there. So he had a pretty storied one. I kind of look at if we were stranded on an island with just the movies of one of the actors, I'd probably rather be watching the Robert Shaw flicks. That's just
Yes.
they all had some pretty good material.
From Russia with Love.
Yeah, yes, a great villain, a great James Bond villain. That is for sure.
one of the better ones in terms of just kind of like evenly stacked Mortal Kombat with James Bond, and also started the quintessential fight on the train motif in the James Bond series.
Yep. Yep.
Yes, a very early one. So obviously, well, some significant actors that did a good job in the movie, great directing, and an interesting story. So, I mean, any closing thoughts on Jaws and what really sticks with you? What really sticks with you to this day as either an impression of a great movie or a particularly memorable scene looking back now 50 years later?
Well, the fact that the actual shark was the star, and we were talking about actors just now, but and on the making of Jaws, that's one of the extra features on the DVD that Beth and I have. Spielberg says when he was talking to the producers, was like, look, the shark is going to be the star here, so let's not look for some big kind of marquee name that's going to make us money. Let's just get good actors.
Yeah.
And so they were looking for good actors, but they weren't necessarily looking for necessarily looking for name actors or the headliners at that point. But when you look at, and I think that part of this was just the reality of what needed of trying to get this stuff on film in a way that was believable, but also because of limitations and possibly just the fact that the Mechanical Sharks didn't really do everything that they would have liked them to do, because there were two of them, if I understand correctly. The fact that the Sharks visibility is so limited when you really get down to it. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end when they're on the boat, you see the shark, but the fact that they were able to use just the foreboding music and put together, like the opening scene where, you see things from the shark's perspective, you never see the shark.
Yeah.
And they don't, when Alex Kintner, the boy, is eaten by the shark, you can see it, you just a little of it. You can see the fin, and if you look carefully, you can see that the shark is there, but it's very quick, and if you're not looking right at it, nobody saw it and stuff like that. I think that's an important aspect of the film. The
Yeah.
Spielberg and just the filmmakers as a whole did a very good job of creating tension, suspense, fear, without having to be reliant on the shark. And it paid off because the shark scenes are more realistic
Oh, yeah.
because they didn't overdo it. They were able to balance the limitations of the mechanical shark with with what they wanted to do, and succeeded.
The whole scene in the pond when the one girl who's out there painting, and all you see is the tip of the dorsal and the tip of the tail just glide under the water. And then you basically just sort of kind of see its mouth when it kills the guy in the boat. And that's it. That's all you see of the shark in the pond scene.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just brilliant.
And a lot from the point of view of the shark,
Yes.
kind of as it's going by the kid and whatever. And that's a very good point, Mike, about the shark being being the biggest star of the movie, and then how they would build it around there. And myself, I look at, I guess I had no idea when we saw the movie, or even when it was as big as it was at the time, that it would really still hold the stature that it does 50 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's only a handful of movies that that really, when you say the name of the movie, that everybody knows what you're talking about. Even people, younger generations that haven't even seen the movie, know what you're talking about, right? When you say the movie Jaws, even if it's like it's a scary movie about about sharks, and then people were scared to go in the water or whatever, or the picture that was on the cover of the book with the shark coming up underneath the water with the red jaws kind of above the surface of the water, and it still gets gets airtime on TBS or TNT or something like that. You see it on the TV still regularly. And I mean, there was a lot of movies that were considered. I mean, we just talked about movies like American Graffiti that were made before that, or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You don't see those movies as much, or hear about those movies as much, or have as much kind of impact. And I think it was the simple little things of Jaws, the shark, the music, that dun dun dun, dun that came out from that just had a way of sticking with society to this day. I just had no idea what we had our arms around at that time when we were reading the book or watching the movie.
It's regarded by some as sort of the first true summer blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the movie was marketed. I mean, earlier he was talking about the fact that Jaws became kind of part of the public consciousness before the movie was released.
Yeah.
Primarily through the book, but through some other things. And apparently the way they marketed it, like they opened it in like 400 and some theaters nationwide, all on the same day, on June 20th of 1975. And they, like in the days leading up to that, there was apparently a different sort of TV ad. They put ads on during TV commercials, and it was, and I don't necessarily understand all the nuances of the marketing approach that the studio took, but it was unique at the time. And it started this summer blockbuster. And we've talked about different ways in which the movie is different than the book. And it's sort of like, okay, look, yeah, there were good guys and bad guys amongst the people, but eventually it was the people are the good guys against the evil predator is the shark,
Mhm.
with a an exciting ending, and characters that you liked, and you were rooting for Brody, and you were
Yeah,
rooting against the shark. And it's sort of not unlike movies like Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, um movies where okay, you got the good guys and the bad guys, and the good guys win.
yeah,
Good triumphs over evil. And so I think that Jaws was sort of one of the first movies. And I mean, Spielberg was involved, I don't know so much in Star Wars, but certainly
yeah,
well, he directed Raiders of the Lost Ark.
yeah,
It was the first of those movies that just were unlike other movies that were coming out at that time. I mean, the 70s, I mean, people talked about the book being kind of post Watergate, mid 70s malaise. Well, a lot of the movies that were coming out at that time were like
yeah.
that. And there were some the 70s was kind of a goofy time in a lot of ways,
It's not the peak
especially
for movies ever.
and but well, for example, we mentioned Sorcerer with Roy Scheider, and that movie, while it's definitely got a very robust cult following, and I know that all three of us regard that as one of the better movies from the 70s, if not of all time. I mean, there's so many things about that movie which I gravitate towards, but it wasn't particularly successful
No,
because
Yeah,
when it came out at the same time as Star Wars.
correct.
yeah,
And people, here's a movie
And
that's
then Dandy
intense,
Candy Film beat it at the box office.
that's
yeah,
intense, complex, morally ambiguous at points. The
yeah.
characters are flawed in many different ways, but they're forced to come to blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
No, screw it. Give
Yeah,
me give me
people don't
the
like that shit.
yeah. And I think that Jaws kind of fit into that template of good versus evil. There's the good guys against the bad guys. That it
Whatever
takes
their
some doing.
flaws, they're the good guys.
Yeah,
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 As
and
opposed to the Sorcerer, where they weren't good guys.
yeah,
yeah. So I think that it was kind of one of the first of the 70s movies. And I don't know, Raiders of the Lost Ark might have been in like 80, 81,
hmm
um,
Yeah.
or early 80s, but it started a trend of movies that were different than a lot of the movies in the 70s. And it's just struck a chord and resonated with the public. I can remember in junior high, people had, because it was the summer between 6th and 7th grade,
yeah,
was 1975. And by the time we got to, and between 6th and 7th grade is in Appleton, that's when you move from elementary school to middle school. And when we got to Roosevelt Junior High School, a lot of the kids had Jaws t-shirts.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was just, it was a, it was, it was a phenomenon. It really was
And it just
at the
had been
time.
held up. It's not like a year later people were throwing their Jaws t-shirt away and no one was ever going to watch that movie again. I mean, it is
Yeah.
50 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still a great movie.
And they're still selling Jaws t-shirts.
Probably.
You'll still see one from time to
Yeah,
time
there you
that is out there. And the marketing of this movie was, they really did step on the gas with this. It's the first time I can recall, maybe there was stuff with like Rosemary's Baby or whatever, but I mean, I can remember there was people, I mean, maybe Mom, that was like, I'm not going to see that. That like they already had people scared just from the marketing, right? It's like no, as popular as it was, mainly because you had teenage boys going to it a half a dozen times during the summer. But I mean, there was whole groups of people that were like, "Oh, I'm not going to see that movie," because they already knew they'd be too scared, watching it, which is a testament to the marketing that they had done and kind of getting it out there. Also, something that just everybody can identify with as I mean, no doubt who the bad guy is going to be. They clearly set it up in the movie, but I don't think anybody was guessing who the bad, because nobody likes sharks, especially when it comes to we happen to be the ones swimming in the water. So a great idea for a story in the first place.
See, I lucked out because my mother had read the book. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like saying, "Hey, do you want to take me to go see Jaws?" I mean, she was just like, "The whole family's going to see Jaws.
Yeah.
We're going to check this out."
Well, there was obviously a different type of movie, but kind of similar. There was a kind of a similar surge when Jurassic Park came out,
Okay.
because Jurassic Park was really seen as a very good book. It was a very successful, very popular, very good book. And when the movie came out, I mean, they couldn't lose.
Yeah.
As far as opening weekend, there was going to be people lined up at the door because it was such a popular, well-written book. And then, you gotta deliver if you're really going to hit it big. But they come out with a book that certainly pleased a lot of the book people. Jaws was a very popular book, and
Oh, yeah.
and if your mom was a librarian, she had some understanding of what a good book was, as opposed to just something that a lot of people are reading. So,
Jurassic Park is a good comparison, and I
Although
think that
no one was ever legitimately scared about being eaten by a dinosaur.
that's true. That's true.
Sorry, go on.
but the but over the I didn't read the book Jurassic Park,
No,
but that was that was Mark, when you and I, we were living together in Madison at the time.
Yeah.
That was in the early 90s, and a number of people we knew were reading the book.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh yeah, this is fabulous. This is great." And so I was hearing people that I knew and whose opinion I had put
Yeah.
some value on, and that were talking about it as just an incredibly, kind of a page turner of a book. And
You were in law
And,
school at the time, so your reading calendar was kind of full
I
at that time.
I did almost no reading of books for pleasure for 3 years
Yeah.
because of that. But yeah, basically. And so I can remember when the movie came out, and I don't know if that was when we were still in Madison and going
yeah.
to see it.
Yeah.
But I anticipated going to see something that was going to be really good.
Yeah.
And that was a well done movie. I mean, there's an argument that Spielberg's accomplishment with Jaws was actually more significant because he was working with so much less technology and money
Totally.
when he made Jaws, and I think that Jaws would rank above Jurassic Park in the perennial classic film. I think Jaws would rank above Jurassic Park.
I would agree to that. The other thing is, it's not just the
I mean,
technology.
Andrew, is your look like no shit? I mean,
Honestly, if somebody came to me and said, "I've never seen Jaws and I've never seen Jurassic Park," I would say, "Do not go to your grave without seeing Jaws. Jurassic Park's a good, fun movie. It's not going to change your life."
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I didn't.
There's no Indianapolis story
Right.
in Jurassic Park. I mean, you've also got to look at it, not just the technology changed, but think about how much rope a 26-year-old, only a couple films under his belt director Steven Spielberg had at the time, with the studios, with the producers, and that type of stuff, compared to you fast forward to how many years later when Jurassic Park comes out.
almost
he's got
20 years.
He's got a much bigger, he's got much more sway. Well, he's got his own production studio by that time, right?
Yeah, but can't help us if Jaws was done with a CGI shark.
I mean, it wouldn't have been CGI because they didn't have CGI at the time. But
No,
if
when he did Jurassic Park, they did.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I'm just saying, these guys were on much more of a leash younger in their career. They couldn't go over budget, right? They, at that point.
That's where the "we're going to need a bigger boat" joke came from.
Yeah,
no. The crew were saying that because they were jammed on these little tiny camera boats.
Yeah,
and they were like elbowing each other, constantly. And people were like, we really need a bigger boat here, and that's where Scheider came up with it when he saw the shark.
It worked. It absolutely. I did not know that it worked. It worked awfully
One
well.
one thing about the that I think is part of it, it's a small part, but I think it's part of one of the reasons why Jaws just happened to strike a chord or whatever you want. It just happened to hit, check off all the boxes, whatever label or euphemism you want to say. Um, uh, it was important to Spielberg that they film on the ocean,
Mhm.
not not one of the back lots in Culver City or Ivan Tor's studios for underwater stuff.
Yeah,
They wanted to have somewhere, and apparently Martha's Vineyard, you can go like 15 miles or some distance offshore, and there's still sandy bottom. It's only about 30 feet deep, and 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 just the look of the ocean is different than the look of a lake
Oh yeah.
yeah,
or something.
totally
I mean, now
agree.
you go to Lake Superior, or for
It's
example. I mean,
close.
okay, no,
Yeah,
now it's close, but the water in Lake Superior too freaking cold
yeah,
for them to have done that. But in any case, it was important that they be able to film on the ocean and that they be able to do so where there wasn't always land right there.
yeah.
And what made me think this was when CGI was mentioned. I think that if there was like a remake of Jaws, even if Spielberg was involved and they used CGI to show the shark, it wouldn't be as good.
No, totally
I
agree.
don't believe it would be as good. Just because seeing, even with digital photography versus film, and especially when you start to throw in CGI, there's just a texture to movies that are shot on film that gives it a type of realism that is sort of found its way into my molecular movie
Yeah,
fandom that I like. And I don't think it wouldn't be as good. You could show a lot more,
yeah.
but I don't think it would be as good.
No way.
Uh, uh,
Oh, no,
and
no argument. No argument was it with that. It's the feel and the look, and it just. I can see people, if there was a remake of Jaws, going and watching it, and maybe someone that had never seen the original, they might enjoy it or not. But I can see a lot of people that saw the original saying, not the same, because CGI, as good as it is, it's still that chum scene. It seeing that stuff actually kind of
uh,
flop off of it's not there. It doesn't have the same feel. You wouldn't feel that thing breathing right up on you like we did in the theater when
Every
we saw it.
time Quint puts a harpoon into it,
Yeah,
I mean, you saw the harpoon hit the, Bruce the fake shark, but I mean, still, you
yeah.
felt it.
You see
Yeah.
something actually happening, and you can tell the difference. As good as CGI is getting, you certainly can see the difference there. So, I don't know. Great movie. Lots of memorable stuff in it. Lots to talk about. Obviously, we all saw a number of things in it that we truly enjoyed. And I mean, anybody out there, if there's somebody out there, if you haven't seen the movie, you need to rent it, stream it, or whatever, and check it out. It is absolutely time well spent. If you should happen to, and there's places that have these retrospectives where they bring these classic movies back to the big screen, you got to get to that if you haven't seen Jaws on the big screen yet. So highly recommended. Any final thoughts, guys?
well, what you said. I mean, just it for whatever reason, everything fell together and it worked. And whether that was Spielberg or the actors or the behind the scenes people or the film editor. I mean, it won. Apparently, I believe that it won the Academy Award for Best Sound Best Film Editing, and I think there was one other. I think it won 3 Academy Awards, none for acting or directing or Best Picture. Although it was nominated for Best Picture, but it was just the right collection of people with the right story at the right time. And like I say, I mean, we've got a DVD here at the house. I mean, it's a major classic for people our age. It just is. It just is.
Andrew, last word.
I saw the theaters at least, I'm going to say, honestly, probably a half a dozen times the year it came out. I owned it on DVD, and I probably watch it once a year. I love that movie.
Time well spent. All right, guys. Great conversation, great movie, and let's catch up again soon.
Sounds good.